Hi everybody, I'm beloved 90s Leatherland character, Hairy Hatman, and welcome to the second video in my oddly named series where I take a look at 8 licensed video game tie-ins on everybody's favourite grey box, the Sony PlayStation. Now ideally I would have titled the video something normal and consistent, but if I want to get people to actually watch my videos, I have to add in some pretty crazy words in there like weird or the world of for some reason. Or better still, I could have used the current meta, which is to title my video something vague and mysterious and then have a thumbnail which looks like I'm about to give a deposition at The Hague. I think that's what people want to watch these days anyway. Sadly, I wouldn't know about any of this because my recommendations are all messed up because I keep putting on 8-hour nature videos for my cats and now I'm basically in the cat algorithm. It's a peaceful life. Anyway, what was I talking about again? Oh yeah, licensed PS1 games. That's the one. So if you don't know, the premise for this video is very simple. I'm going to take a look at 8 licensed video game tie-ins plucked from the massive Sony PlayStation library. The only rule is that the game has to be connected to an existing property in some way, shape or form. Why am I doing this? Well, to feed my insatiable hunger for licensed video game trash, of course, and if I want to play them all before the ravages of time or my incredibly unhealthy diet of Pepsi Max and black coffee, aka the brown water diet, take me down, I better get cracking. So let's kick things off with our first game, which is a PlayStation game based on an animated series, which looks like a cutscene from a PlayStation game.
That's right, it's ReBoot, the much-loved Canadian CGI animated series about dudes fucking up viruses in a computer world. It was the first CGI TV show I can remember seeing as a kid, and let me tell you, I did not like the way this show looked. I was a little too 2D animated pilled as a child, I guess you could say, but luckily it's a show I've really grown to appreciate over the years. This super early silicone graphics era 3D just fits a show about 90s computer warriors so well. Like, the show itself is pretty damn fun, but aesthetically there's just nothing else like it. Also, Hexadecimal is such a crazy character design. She goes from serve to incredibly creepy, like nobody else. Fair play to her. Anyway, here's the PS1 game, which was released in 1998 from EA of all people, and sadly also just after the show was cancelled apparently, which mustn't have been fun for anybody involved. Luckily, the game though is pretty fun. Oddly, it's a hoverboard platformer, which even more oddly is not the first time I've played one of these on the PlayStation, although unlike Cyberdeck, which is a game I do not like, ReBoot is thankfully a much better hoverboard platformer, and you can trust me, a man in the unique position of playing at least 2 hoverboard platformers. You play as the series protagonist Bob, the best name a protagonist can have, after Brian of course, and you ride around in relatively small arena style levels on your zip board. The main objective in each level is to close a number of tears before a time limit runs out and the world just collapses in on itself, something that is clearly quite bad. Now the gameplay mostly revolves around you trying to navigate to these tears via some hoverboard platforming, which as you'd imagine takes a little getting used to, but I was surprised how fun the movement tech felt once you got the hang of it. I'm sure some people will bounce off it right away, but if you take some time to get used to it and are pretty good with playing around with momentum, you'll be surprised with how precise you can be in this game. Each level usually has about 3 tears total that pop up intermittently, and once you've closed them all with your little tear beam, you've then got to collect some keys to activate the exit, which you can do at your leisure, alongside blasting enemies and collecting the usual PS1 array of pickups and items. Honestly, I ended up enjoying this one a lot more than I expected to. Granted, the combination of the unusual movement and tight camera makes this a very PS1 game, so I'm certain it's not going to be for everybody, but as somebody who is very used to this particular style of game on the console, the gameplay and level exploration was really up my alley. It kind of felt a little like if Tony Hawk was a platformer where you also shoot little robot virus guys. I'm sure that'll sell it to some of you. And while it may not be the prettiest game on the console, it is most certainly a ReBoot game with a very fitting soundtrack, tons of cutscenes, and lots of cameos from your fave characters in the show, so fans of the series definitely won't be disappointed. Anyway, moving on from a Canadian icon, let's now look at an American icon, one that must suffer the fate of all American icons. That's right, it's a kart racer. You guessed it, it's one of the 800 characters Mel Blanc voiced, Woody Woodpecker, and he's here in his one and only PlayStation game, Woody Woodpecker Racing, a 2000 release from developer Cyrox Entertainment and publisher Konami. Now this is the period where Konami just licensed a whole lot of stuff, because if there's one company who needed to release more games on the PlayStation, it's Konami. Anyway, Woody Woodpecker Racing, as you can imagine, is a pretty generic kart racer. In fact, almost 90% of the children's kart racers out there are pretty generic from my experience. I have played an unfortunate amount of Shrek and Ben 10 racing games, let's just put it that way. Now Woody here falls squarely into the lower mid-tier, I'd say. It's not terrible, it's just about adequate. If we're ranking it on the Smurfs racing scale, I'd say this one is a little lower, but not by much. So things I like about this game: there's a decent variety of tracks and locales based on different countries of the world. Obviously, since this is a Woody Woodpecker game, the first track is in Brazil, as you'd expect. I like that the game has a road rash, or a street racer style attack system that lets you hit opponents on your side, even if it's kind of broken. I like that you can also eliminate opponents permanently from a match if you reduce their hot dog count to 0. Coincidentally, if you do the same thing to me, I will also die. I love that the game has a little penguin called Chili Willy, who I of course exclusively play as.
We want Chili Willy! We want Chili Willy!
I like that the game has different vehicle types depending on the style of track you're racing on. There's 4 in total, and they do in fact control noticeably different from each other. And probably the best thing about the game, some of the music goes pretty hard, but then again, as you'll see throughout the video, that's kind of just a side effect of being on the PlayStation. Your game gets cool music. So yeah, that all sounds pretty good, but the issues I have with this game mostly come down to the track design, vehicle controls, and the weapons. You know, the most important parts of a kart racer, all of which are kinda subpar in this game. So there's a drift system, right, that kind of speeds you up, but it feels very loose, and I often found it was better to just feather the brake to deal with most of the turns in this game. And in some vehicles it feels really bad, in others it does feel pretty good, but it never really felt right no matter which way I was doing things. The AI is also crazy unpredictable in this thing, with some wild rubber banding going on, so races can get pretty hectic even by kart racer standards, resulting in the game just feeling a bit messy a lot of the time. Now, like most games of this ilk, you will get used to it the more that you play, and if I got this as a kid, I most certainly would have played it, and it does have more content than some kart racers out there. Looking at you, Arthur, and the Smurfs. But nowadays, sadly, even Chili Willy isn't enough for me to recommend this one to anybody with the most die-hard Woody Woodpecker fan. Let's just be glad we're not doing this series on the PS2 with the Cryo Interactive Woody Woodpecker game, which honestly, I'm not gonna lie, I'm morbidly curious about, but we've enough here on the PS1 to keep us busy, so let's ignore that for now and move on to everybody's favorite region-specific exclusives. And let's start with a pal banger about a Belgian boy with a shit haircut. One of the many PS1 games based on a famous Belgian comic book character, it's Tintin, Destination Adventure, a game about the Belgian teenage reporter who goes around with his cool dog solving international crimes. He also got a bunch of animated series and even a CGI animated movie, which of course featured Andy Serkis, a guy who grows stronger and stronger the longer he is in a mocap suit. As for me, I only really know Tintin from his 90s cartoon, which did have a cool opening theme and featured him in a little shark submarine, which I'm not gonna lie is pretty great. As for the game, it's fine, I guess. This is another 2.5D Infogrames platformer, which actually reminds me a lot of other Infogrames platformers in this style, particularly Lucky Luke, which is also based off a Belgian comic, conveniently enough. That game was a mixture of 2.5D platforming and some gimmick levels, and Tintin here is pretty much the exact same, only where Lucky Luke was a cowboy with a gun, Tintin is a reporter with a camera, and he also throws bottles of chloroform at people. Seriously, there's a whole dedicated chloroform button. Well, I say that, it is also shared with Bark, which is of course for Tintin's dog Snowy, who you play as in the bonus levels, and is undoubtedly the best character. So the premise is pretty fun. You're actually watching Tintin reminisce on some old adventures via a slideshow, and each one is a retelling of said adventure with little story tidbits in between. Now most levels usually feature a simple, straightforward linear section with a lot of platforming and coin collecting, and also a vehicle section where you also collect coins. Now these vehicle sections all fundamentally play the same, but there is a nice variety of vehicles to pilot at least, including the Shark Sub, which I won't lie did get a pop out of me. Really my issue with this game is that it plays it very safe and by the numbers. It's exactly what you'd expect a French-made Tintin platformer to play like. Competent, sometimes pretty, but mostly very dull. I mean, there's only so many animals you can permanently blind before things start to lose their luster. Also, even though this is a PAL exclusive and as such runs a bit slower, the performance in this game is very spotty with a very inconsistent frame rate, and some of the vehicle levels in particular, it can get very bad at times. As a lot of you know, I'm not really a stickler for frame rates and performance in my games, but it is tough to ignore in this one, sadly. So yeah, just like Lucky Luke, Tintin is another okay, but overall underwhelming Belgian comic tie-in that should only really be sought out by fans of the series. But hey, things could be worse. At least Is Not Is No Good, a game that literally tells you all you need to know from the title, which conveniently is also a good descriptor for our next game. Action Man, the greatest hero of them all. You know, I've never owned a single Action Man doll or figure, but that slogan sure did get stuck in my head. Now for those unaware, Action Man is more or less the British variant of G.I. Joe, by which I mean a UK company straight up just licensed G.I. Joe for sale over there and then changed the name. Now he's not just a man, but a man of action. And this man had various different forms over the years. The one I'm most familiar with is the 90s Hasbro action figure era, where he stopped being an army man and becomes more of a spy with cool gadgets and vehicles and fights a bunch of toxic themed baddies, most notably his arch nemesis Dr. X, who, let's be fair, looks like he'd be in a banging punk band. Anyway, on occasion, Action Man even got his own video games, and this is one of them. Action Man Mission Xtreme, a 2000 release which you think would be a PAL exclusive, but this one also got released over North America with the name changed to Operation Xtreme, and you know what? Kinda like this one. This game comes from Blitz Studios, who are then known as Interactive Studios, a company founded by the Oliver twins, aka the Dizzy the Egg guys, and the best way to describe this game is that it's kind of a low budget and more kid-friendly take on Metal Gear Solid, UI and all. And also on occasion there's some vehicular sections that play a little bit like an old school GTA game. A pretty nice combo honestly, and when you think of this property and what it entails, it more or less covers all the bases, by which I mean here's all the cool toys and vehicles you can buy right now, but in video game form. Now when I say kid friendly, there is still a whole lot of guns and murdering dudes in this game, but if you look at the loading screen it says they're not dead, they're actually captured. So take that, age ratings board, you dumb idiots. I can gun down who I want and there's nothing you can do about it. Now while the vehicle sections are pretty fun and include a few different vehicles to drive around in and also collect coins as is tradition, these sections are pretty short and sometimes a little bit janky, and I'd say the real meat of this game are the larger spy-like levels where you parachute in, do some investigating, capture some grunts, use your spy gadgets, and eventually fight a big toxic plant. You know, the usual stuff. Now, none of this is particularly groundbreaking gameplay-wise, but it is done a lot better than you'd expect for a budget game based on a UK kids action figure. There's also some really cool technical stuff here that I enjoy, like the way the map zooms out, and in particular, the way the enemy models get transported right out of the game world into this little info dump section. I don't think I've ever seen anything like that before in a game. It's a really cool little trick, whatever it is. Really my main issue with this thing is that it's generally quite easy, which isn't a problem in and of itself, but the game literally stops you to tell you what you need to do in almost every situation, which not only takes a lot of fun out of discovering things, but also interrupts the game quite often, which isn't ideal. But honestly, even taking that into consideration, if you're looking for a fun, kinda underrated little spy action man game, you could certainly do a lot worse than this. And hey, look, while we're here, we might as well take a look at the only other Action Man game on the console, which is pretty much just like this one, but in reverse. Coming roughly a year after the last one, we have the second and final Action Man game on the console, and that's Destruction X, also by Blitz Studios, and this time a legit PAL exclusive. And when I say it's like the last one but in reverse, what I mean is that this one is primarily about driving in vehicle sections, but it also includes a small amount of third-person action segments. And when I say a small amount, I really mean it. It's literally just this opening dinosaur fight and also the final boss. But hey, I won't knock a dinosaur fight, especially when you get a cool boomerang and the dinosaur is puking acid. So yeah, driving is the name of the game here, and luckily it is significantly improved over the previous game in almost every way, from the controls to the visuals to the mission types. This is really kind of like an Action Man GTA clone, only you don't get out of the vehicle and instead do nice things like kill terrorists and put out fires. You still do collect coins though, it is a PS1 game after all. Now the basic flow of this game is pretty simple. It's split into multiple hub style areas with a variety of missions to complete. Some are races, some require you to blow up enemies on the street, or do a whole bunch of mini games or cool spy stuff, and completing missions earns you action points, which you can then cash in at police stations to capture some hardened criminals, and if you capture enough of these criminals, you then get to move on to the next area. There's a surprising amount of things to do here really, and while you will end up repeating things as the game goes on, if you like this style of overhead racing game, or you know, something like Micro Machines or GTA, this is once again a lot better than you would probably expect a game based on, well, this guy to be. And while I thought Mission Xtreme was a decent looking game in its own right, the presentation here in Destruction X is really quite good. 2001 is where you'd see some of the best visuals the PlayStation has to offer before people really started to phone it in from around 2002 onwards, which you'll see an example of shortly. But across the board, this is a clean and very pretty PlayStation game, and look, the soundtrack in this one, also full of some low-key bangers. This ice area in particular has this very 2000 era trip hop beat, which I really appreciate. So yeah, Action Man on the PlayStation, you really can't go wrong. Unfortunately, I can't say the same for the PS2 though, which has a game about an Action Man teen squad. Seriously, folks like to say that the PS1 got shovelware, and while that is certainly true in its later days, it is nothing compared to the PS2. That thing has some absolute dirt. And speaking of absolute dirt, now I'm sure a lot of you out there might be surprised to know the PlayStation did in fact get a Ghostbusters game, and not just any Ghostbusters game, a game based on the '97 animated series Xtreme Ghostbusters. And not only that, it's a PAL exclusive and a light gun shooter, and it came out in 2004, 7 years after the series finished airing. I mean, what the hell is going on here? Now sadly, as I alluded to earlier, PlayStation games that came out very late in the console's life cycle, and I mean very late, were usually not known for their quality, and this one here I was really hoping would be good, because come on, an Xtreme Ghostbusters light gun game with time crisis mechanics, I mean, who doesn't want that? Well, sadly it's not good. Now from the get-go, you can tell this bad boy is very low budget, but there is some promise here. I mean, there's training missions, you can choose from the 4 main characters from the series, seemingly with different stats that can affect things like damage, health, and your cursor speed, which is kind of interesting. And there's also a small amount of cutscenes from the show, which I didn't really expect to see here, but once you get into the game, it becomes clear very quickly, this game does not have the sauce. Also, it's one of those light gun games that keeps in the flashes even if you're using a controller, which is not very fun, and once again makes good use of the flashing warning that I put at the beginning of every video. Seriously, I want to talk about the light gun game Crypt Killer so bad, but that game is like Flash Central, and Not in a good way like Newgrounds. Anyway, beyond this game being just pretty low budget and ugly in a visual sense, which I can personally deal with if the gameplay was good, this thing is just so boring. The whole game has 3 regular enemy types that are copy and pasted throughout the entire thing, and while you know that's kind of true for a lot of light gun games, I mean Blue Man and Red Man, the feedback on shooting these guys is not great. I mean the feedback on shooting in this game in general is not great. There's a basic shot type which uses a small amount of ammo, or you can use up half your ammo to fire a proton beam that kind of just homes in on enemies and takes most of the challenge out of the game. But the biggest sin of all, in my opinion, is that this game has no excitement or momentum. When you move throughout a level, you usually take 2 to 3 steps and then have to fight a wave of enemies for about 90 seconds. And this is pretty much the entire game. Move a very small distance, fight the same enemies for 90 seconds, and then do it again until you fight a boss if you're lucky. It's just so boring. And while yeah, I'd probably have more fun with a light gun, let's not pretend having a light gun would salvage this thing. This is 2004 after all. We were inundated with good light gun games at this point, all of which can highlight the key to this genre, which is having momentum and being able to quickly move from one cool action set piece to the next. Something that they've literally been nailing since the very first days of the genre. This unfortunately has no momentum or variety or excitement, and as such, it is a very boring game, and probably the worst light gun game I've personally played on the console. And it really sucks to say that about a light gun game where you shoot ghosts with a dude in a wheelchair, because that is pretty extreme in fairness. But sure, look, here we are. So to kick things up a notch and get the excitement flowing again, next we're going to check out a game that everybody will love because it features a dolphin swimming to some ska music. Well, I don't know about you, but I think we've had enough PAL exclusives in this video, so let's balance things out by looking at a North American exclusive, and that's Animorphs Shattered Reality, a game based on the book series about kids hanging out with aliens and getting the power to turn into animals. It also had a live-action TV series with a banging theme song and Iceman from the X-Men movies, which I'm much more familiar with. Anyway, Animorphs received a number of video game tie-ins over the years, 2 of which were on the PC and Game Boy Color, and both of these are turn-based role-playing games, which is kinda cool. And of course we have the PS1 entry here, Shattered Reality, which is sadly not a turn-based role-playing game, but is a platformer where you collect coins. And as we know by now, coins are pretty cool. Released in late 2000, interestingly this game comes from a developer called Single Track, who are responsible for Warhawk and the first 2 Twisted Metal games, and also a bunch of other Twisted Metal adjacent vehicular combat games like Critical Depth, which is Twisted Metal but underwater and with cool pirate music. Anyway, given the pedigree of Single Track's releases on the console, things sound pretty promising for Animorphs here, but alas, this game is sadly a more low-key and low-budget affair, at least when it comes to the gameplay. This is an oftentimes rather janky and short little platformer, which features 4 playable characters, and the game is split into human segments, which is mostly just a lot of jumping and coin collecting, and also combat on occasion, where you turn into an animal and basically run around and bop enemies until one of you dies. And look, the combat in this game, for as fun and derpy as these animals look, it is not good, but I can't stress enough how derpy the animals look, and that is a saving grace for me. As for the human platforming segments though, they're really nothing groundbreaking, but to the game's credit, the control of the characters and the difficulty of some of these segments I found quite good actually. If you can ignore the layers of jank baked into some of the animations and environments, this is a pretty fun game to jump about in and collect coins, and will challenge you on occasion. The most obvious game to compare this to in this video is probably Tintin, and personally I found the movement and level design a lot more engaging in Animorphs, even if Tintin is the better looking of the 2 games. Another thing that's similar to Tintin are the vehicular style levels, only instead of a vehicle, you're a dolphin or a dragonfly or a bat. These are once again levels where you're avoiding hazards and collecting coins, but once again, They're also a little better than the vehicle segments in Tintin, I found, and these ones are a little bit more spread out throughout the game and were a welcome surprise whenever they popped up. But speaking of welcome surprises, the absolute #1 reason to play Animorphs, in my opinion, is the pretty incredible and sometimes wild soundtrack that this game is packing. It was composed by Chucky Mayers and Tommy Hopkins of Big Idea Productions, who also did the music for most of Singletrack's other games, and I feel they were just given free rein to go crazy with this thing, and as a result, the music in Animorphs here is super fun and just all over the map. I mean, we got some banging ska music in the Dolphin level. And even a full-on vocal track in the Dragonfly level. Like, how could you not love this? So yeah, while Animorphs Shattered Reality isn't the most exciting of the Animorphs games out there, as far as platformers based on a kids book series go, you can definitely have some fun with this one. It's short, it's got dolphin ska, and a very derpy bear, and you know what? You'll love to see it. Anyway, this brings us to our final game of the episode, and as always, I like to keep the best for last, and by best, I mean a game that is often considered one of the console's very, very worst. That's right, it's V.I.P, aka Valerie Iron's Protection, the video game tie-in to the pretty popular at the time Pamela Anderson Bodyguard TV show, which is very of its time, but if you like cheesy late 90s and early 90s action TV shows where good-looking people beat up generic bad guys, it's about as good as it gets. It also has a Steve Austin cameo, and as far as wrestling cameos go, that is also about as good as it gets.
First you hit him with the chair to the head.
Right, or you smash your face into a turnbuckle. What you got to make sure you do is daze them first, and then wham, kick you in the gut, pick them up like this. Oh, you got your pile driver right here.
Must be awesome being a pro wrestler.
That's pretty cool. I got a couple of action figures.
Anyway, if you know much about the PlayStation library, and in particular bad PlayStation games, you've probably come across V.I.P before, a 2001 release from Ubisoft that I've at least seen the first few minutes of gameplay in countless YouTube videos over the years, and it certainly doesn't paint a pretty picture of the game, with its low-res pre-rendered backgrounds and gameplay that almost entirely seems to be made up of button prompt QuickTime events. I can certainly see why it might not appeal to a lot of folks out there. Now, this being my first time playing it, honestly at first I didn't really mind the button prompt combat. It's kind of funny how dudes just walk up to your character and then get battered in exceedingly funny low energy ways, and honestly the animations on the characters ain't too bad either. And once you get into the shooting segments, these also weren't that bad. The sound effects were punchy and the pace was pretty quick and fun. And this is also the point where I realized this game uses the exact same sound effect library that both Loaded and GoldenEye use, which is a very video game brain pill thing to notice, but you can't argue a good gunshot and enemy dying noises. So honestly, early on I was kinda digging this game. It was certainly simple, but everything here is very funny and tongue-in-cheek, kind of like the show, I guess you could say. I mean, just look at this stealth segment early on into the game. It is so stupid. So yeah, in a nutshell, you move from segment to segment, try to get combos by getting all of your inputs correct in a row, and occasionally play a little minigame to spice things up. At the end, it tallies up all your points, and then you can use these points to purchase pictures of Pamela Anderson, which, you know, if you bought this game, is probably really what you're after. However, that being said, as the game went on, the variety really began to dry up, and the overwhelming majority of this gameplay is in fact taken up by the button prompt QuickTime events, and while these are certainly a bit funny at first, they do really begin to outstay their welcome, and the novelty of the animations and guys in suits just getting beaten up in funny ways doesn't last, I'm sad to say. If this game had more shooting segments or a better variety of minigames spaced out between these button prompt segments, I honestly think this would have been a fine little game. But when a good 95% of your game is just standing around and inputting commands to attack dudes in suits, it's just not the vibe, I'm sad to say. Does that mean it's one of the worst games on the console? Well, I could certainly see why some people would think so, but there is at least enough here that I found fun or got a laugh out of me that I could see some merit in it. It's bad, but it's also charmingly stupid, and I do love a stupid game. However, one thing I noticed when researching this thing is a PAL exclusive PS2 version, and from my experience in the early 2000s, if a game is multi-plat with a PS2 and PS1 version, the next gen model is usually where all the budget went. So I decided to briefly check out that game, and let me tell you, this right here is the idealized version of V.I.P. I mean, it's still not very good, and the shooting segments are somehow actually worse, but in terms of animation, visuals, locations, and sheer stupidity, this thing right here is a funny fucking video game. It's got more minigames, more variety, and the button prompt QuickTime events have actual choreographed combat instead of, you know, just standing still and beating up guys who run at you like you're Steven Seagal or something. Like I said, it's still not a great video game, but it is an undeniably stupid and charming one, and that's something I can always appreciate. And you can trust me, a stupid and charming man.
Anyway, that was a look at 8 more licensed video games for the PlayStation 1. And what did we learn today? Well, once again, not a whole lot really. I think the big takeaway from this video, at least for me anyway, is that ReBoot and the 2 Action Man games are pretty good. The PS2 version of V.I.P is significantly better and dumber than the PS1 version, and also every game can benefit from having some dolphin ska, I think. So maybe it was a worthwhile video after all. Who can say? Well, I'll tell you who can say. You can, in the comments below. Let me know what you thought of today's episode, the games that were included, and if there's any games that you too would like to see show up in future episodes of the series, be they good or bad. As you know, I'm happy to play literally anything, and I am an absolute glutton for trash, so do your worst. I'd also like to give a huge thank you to my lovely Patreon supporters who've kept me going steady on the brown water diet for many years now, including fine folks like
Alan Caslin, Alias McDowell, Alan Berry, Andrew Vodopia, and L with Knees, Bleeding Cart, Bloody Cassie, Brendan Hess, Brian, Calomello, Casey Wagner, Clumbums, Danny, Dave Nolan, Discun, the mascot for the Famicom Disk System, Doma, Etchy Gamer, Fergal O'Hagan, Fragile Traveller, Gigazol, Eero Forte, Jacob Althouse, Jared Bynum, Jumbo81, JR Hurd, Jude, Corley2K1, Karuran, Kyle Winter, Life Sword, Lurkish Delight, Meester Papala, Mikael, Moomin Biscuit, Trans Rights Are Human Rights, Mr. the Joshmon, My Pal Robot, Nathan McMullen, Nick Norman, Olo Wakander, Pika Foop, Richard Kramer, SN Kierstead, Cyeno, Sean Slater, Spectre117, Spectre117, Esor, The Friendly Chocoball Bird, Kioro-chan, Tolkoto, Will Savoy, and Zark, who have all subscribed at the Fan++ tier.
And finally, I'd like to give a huge shout out to you at home or wherever you are for watching this video. I sure do hope you enjoyed it. I'll be back in the hopefully not too distant future with a video that's been a pretty long time in the making and I should really get back to making, so keep your eyes peeled for whatever that may be. But until then, look after yourselves, be good to one another, and I'll talk to you again real soon. See ya!